Let me ask you what slavery is. How would you define it? Someone who is owned by another person and treated as a property, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
They have no freedom, forced to work without pay, or even beaten because they don't have any human rights. Well, that's not what slavery is in Islam. Slavery has existed for thousands of years and it just ended around last century. It makes you wonder, right? Like, why for so many years slavery was a thing in society? Because it benefited the civilizations in a way that they had more manpower for less cost. Because slaves had no rights, so they weren't paying much for them. And this way they were making more profits. So in our history, for a nation not to use slaves where other nations do, puts them in a very disadvantage in terms of economy and military power.
That's an interesting way of putting. That makes sense.
Islam put boundaries on slavery. It allows only the enslavement of non-Muslims captives during a war. As are more ways to enslave a person. So let's give an example, right? For example, a Muslim army defeats their opponents who they have fought against. There are options to decide what will happen to the captives of war. The one who determines which option to take is the leader of the time. That sees the most fits for that situation and his nation. These options are such as letting all captives go free, which sounds nice, but you'll be risking future attacks from the enemy. You can trade captives with money, or exchange them with Muslim prisoners from the other side. You can kill them, because those people are coming to kill you, so you have every right to do the same. And there aren't any prisons like today where you can keep the prisoners, so you gotta do something. Or you can enslave them. So the leader decides based on the current situation the best option for his nation. Does he need money, saving his comrades, manpower, etc. If it's decided to enslave the captains of war, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explains how we should treat the Mulk al Yamin, what our right hand possesses. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, feed them from the same food you eat, clothe them with the same clothes you wear, and do not burden them with so much work that they are overwhelmed. If you do burden them, then help them. In other hadith, Prophet, peace be upon him, says, if someone slaps or beats his slave, then he should free him. So in Islam, there isn't beating or banging slaves, or some might think that is the case. It is completely forbidden. Also, in the Quran, Allah gives the rights to slaves to free themselves with what is called mukataba, a contract where the slave pays a certain amount of money to free himself.
Yeah. I'm free.
In fact, to support the slaves, Allah commands the owner to give out of his wealth to slaves to free himself. And there are other verses in the Quran where Allah commands or recommends to free the slaves. Al-birra man amina billahi. Righteousness is in one who believes in Allah. Wa fi riqab. One of the good deeds and the righteous deeds is to freeing the slaves. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what can make you know what the good way is? Fakku raqabah is to freeing the slaves. Not only this, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to pay zakah, which is one of the 5 pillars in Islam, and one of the recommended ways to give is to freeing the slaves. And even in the Quran, there is something called expiation of sin, meaning if I commit a sin and want to expiate, forgiven of that sin, then one of the ways is to freeing the slaves. So Allah opened so many doors for freeing the slaves. Recommended if the believers free them, Allah will save them from the hellfire.
Brian, you are free to go. What?
Islam doesn't abolish slavery straight away, as it wouldn't be wise to remove something the whole generation depended on. Instead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most wise, gradually detached the Mulk al Yamin from the society by adding conditions and rewards on having and freeing the slaves. Like, you can only enslave captives of war that can't fight against you, not the people of the land. In fact, in a hadith, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, Allah is against 3 persons in the day of resurrection, and one of them is the person who takes a free person and sells them. You have to treat them like they are your family. Feed them, clothe them with what you have. And if you do free them, as it recommended in Islam, then you'll be rewarded with mercy of Allah in dunya and hereafter. So considering all this, does Islam really have slavery? No, not by its definition. Okay, so inshallah this topic was clear. Tell me what you think in the comments. May Allah keep us all on the right path. Assalamun Alaikum.
هدايا صاحي كي تستريح